How's it going, everyone? Just a quick sound check. Just let me know in the chat if you can hear me okay, and then we'll get started. Nice. Okay, so welcome to the stream. It is the React stream. I apologize that it took so long to do another stream. I think the last one was about a month and a week ago or something like that. There's a couple setbacks that set us back a total of 2 weeks. The previous stream, I had tried something kind of wacky where I was going to solve your GitHub issues. And I thought it was a really cool idea, but 5 days went by, or I think 4, and nobody submitted any issues, so we weren't able to do that stream. So we replaced it with this one, and here we are. So I'm going to talk about I got a bunch of channel updates and announcements to make, and that should take about 5 minutes or so. So in the meantime, if you have any React questions and you ask them in the chat, please make sure that you prefix them with either Q question or question colon. And if you do that, they'll show up in Discord, and that's how I'll see them. I try to watch chat as well. Sometimes I get wrapped up in what I'm talking about and I just don't see chat. So if you have a question, that's the best way to make it happen. And we didn't get a ton of questions for this stream, so everybody who asks a question in the chat, as long as it's relevant, I should be able to get to it today. And we should be able to go for about 1 hour, and we'll put out a lot of information, answer a lot of questions. It will be really good. So while you get those questions ready, I'm going to talk about the channel updates and announcements. So the biggest announcement I think that I have is that Emkc contests are live. And we've so far carried out 2 of them. They've been a lot of fun. We've had a lot of people who have participated. Let me actually pull it up real quick so you can check it out. So what Emkc contests are is they are code golf style contests where people submit the shortest solution to a problem. So our previous one was called Rays of Sunshine, and in this one, taking 2 input arguments, you had to produce this output, which was kind of like a ASCII picture of a sun. And whoever could produce this with the shortest amount of code basically won. And we had a lot of really great submissions. So the winner for this one was Mem. He used Perl and 104 characters, and he was able to produce the solution. And then as we go down the list, we see that it gets longer and longer. So this was the second of 2 contests that we did. It was a huge success. It was a lot of fun. I took part in it. I did not do as well as everybody else, but that's okay. And we're going to continue doing these. Every single Sunday, we'll post a new one at 5 p.m. UTC, and then they will run for exactly 4 days. So it'll run from Sunday to Thursday, 5 p.m. UTC to 5 p.m. UTC. And if you have one of the top 3 solutions, you'll get an award. If you have one of the top solutions per language, you'll also get an award. And then if you just submit a solution that works at all, you'll get a participation award. And then anybody who takes part in one of the first 5 contests, so there's 3 left, will get an exclusive early contest participant award. So if you'd like to get involved in this, the URL is emkc.org/contests. I'll put that in the chat here. That is where you can go if you'd like to take part in these. They're a lot of fun. You can also see the 2 old contests and some of the solutions that people did. It's been a lot of fun, and I think it's going to get more popular in the future, and it's going to get more exciting in the future. So I'm very excited for that. The second update is around like Emkc future plans. So I've been on kind of a wild Emkc development spree lately. Starting with contests, but culminating ultimately with the profile page. I want Emkc to have a profile page that will show kind of everything you've done on Emkc, as well as to some degree on the Engineer Man Discord server. So it's going to contain, picture, your username, not your username, but your display name, and then all the trophies you've earned, all the challenges you've completed, and just kind of a sum of everything you've done on Emkc and in the Engineer Man community, kind of as a whole. That's funny, my drink is green, so it's like, it's acting like a green screen. That's neat. So I think that'll be cool. We're going to add some additional features as well, typically around like tools. I know we have snippets, we have CLI scripts. A long time ago, we did collaborative code writing within Emkc. I didn't implement it properly. It was an experiment. I kind of tried to implement it without researching, the best way of how to implement it. So now that I know the right way, I think I'm going to give that another go. And I want to expand CLI scripts. I think that's a really good tool. And anything else that people might want that they tell me on Discord or during one of my streams or whatever, I'm always happy to have a look at that. So yeah, we're going to expand Emkc in the future, and I think that'll really be great. So as far as updates and announcements, that's really it. Contest was the big one. I hope I see everybody in the contest and, submit the winning solution and you will get an award. It'll be a lot of fun. Okay, so as far as our format for the stream, it's just like every other stream. We're going to answer a bunch of questions. There are a bunch of questions that were submitted ahead of time. I think about 12 or 13, 14, which I condensed them down to about 9 because some of them are duplicates. And then I have some demonstrations about React as well. And then we'll also answer questions from the chat. So let's pretty much just jump right into that. So I want to start with what is React? If you're coming here today and you have no clue what React.js is, then I want to give kind of a high level overview on that. So rather than just copy and pasting from the React site, I described it in the way that I think it is. So when somebody asks me what React is, I'd say it's a super cool, unopinionated, it's a very important word, we'll talk about that later, one-way data binding front-end framework that combines HTML and JavaScript together in a non-brain damage way. So this is, if you ever use something like Vue.js or Angular, or maybe you're an old guy like me and you use something like Knockout, back in the early 2000s, then this is a similar thing with one primary difference of it's not huge, and thus it's not attempting to do everything. It's attempting to do one thing really well, and that's components that are rendered efficiently by way of a model that already exists. So like a list of items or text box or something like that. So it's, if you've never used a tool like this, and maybe you have like a jQuery background, then React and Vue and Angular, those could all be kind of shocking because you sort of have to invert your thinking. When one uses jQuery to take actions on a web page, they're thinking, okay, well, I take X action, which updates the page in Y way. Whereas with React, you don't necessarily take an action that updates the page. What you do is you have a representation of your data, and then you have the HTML version that represents that data. And all you really do is you update the data, and then React does everything else. You update the data, and then React pushes all that down into HTML and shows the proper stuff according to the way you've done. So it's kind of this inversion of control. Instead of take actions on the data, directly on the page, you just update the data in React, and then it will just re-render what it needs to re-render. I'm just looking at some of the take the kebab case name. Tony asked, when using create React app template, can you take the kebab case name and insert it in the public title case? I'm not actually sure what that means. You can put anything you want in the title, and you should be able to use kebab case really anywhere, with the exception of class names, of course, because the dash would not be valid in that name. But I'm sorry, I'm not entirely sure what that question means. Okay, what is React? We just covered that. Is Redux Dead? No, but I've actually never used it. I actually got a question on Redux in that was submitted ahead of time, but I've never actually used it. I know it's a way of taking React further if you want to make it slightly more opinionated. I would not say it's dead at all. I know a lot of people that do use it. I don't personally use it just because I'm not entirely sure that I see the value for the type of stuff I do. But that doesn't mean that it's bad. It just means that I've never really used it that often. Use state. Okay, we're gonna get back to that later. What is server-side rendering? Which technologies are used in it? So we're gonna look at that a little bit. There was a question around that. Server-side rendering is kind of when there's sort of two ways to get the HTML to the page. So the first way, of course, is just to bundle all the HTML with React, and the thing about that is that ends up in your final bundle, so it takes space. Of course, you know, the more HTML, the bigger the bundle. Server-side rendering would allow you to render it in a way where it's not actually in that bundle. You're actually making a request to a backend service, and then that backend service gives you the info that you need. So it's sort of an alternate way to do kind of the same thing if it makes sense for your use case. I saw one thing in the chat. Can you explain what opinionated means? Thank you for that question. That's fantastic. So when I talk about like an opinionated technology, I talk about a technology that is attempting to get you to do things their way. Like they decide up front, they say, this is our convention. One example is, you know, the latest version of Angular makes an opinion on what language you should use. And the opinion they made is TypeScript. So not ideal. With React, they don't make an opinion on the language you use. You can use JavaScript, you can use TypeScript, you can use whatever. So that's one opinion. You know, another opinion is in kind of how all the pieces fit together. You know, like Angular wants you to use CSS like directly into their components, whereas React doesn't really care what you do with CSS. It doesn't make an opinion on that. So really what it comes down to is the less opinions a tool has, the more flexibility you ultimately have. Now, that doesn't mean that opinionated tools are necessarily bad. It just means that opinionated tools contain kind of more flexibility. But you know, the upside of using an opinionated tool is it's often batteries included, which is to say that you're getting not only the technology, but you're getting kind of everything you could possibly need. You don't have to go fill in the blanks or anything like that. So sometimes that's attractive to people and sometimes it's not. So it kind of just depends. Will you be doing anything practical today? Yes, absolutely. I have a, you can sort of see part of it here in the background. We'll be looking at a small React app here probably in about 10 minutes. Okay, so for the submitted questions, the first question that I got was, does React completely replace the need to use jQuery, or is it at all useful to use it in both the same projects? It's from Colin Patchett. And the answer is that, you know, the shorter answer is pretty much. If you used jQuery to do the things that you would ordinarily do in React, then yes, React can replace it entirely. But that doesn't mean that like jQuery is disallowed in React. It's actually perfectly common to run both in your application and use them when you'd like. The only caveat is that if you're going to use React and jQuery together, you have to make sure that the things that you're doing with jQuery are not updating the things that React is controlling. So like if React were to render a list of HTML items, you wouldn't want to use jQuery to kind of mess with those items, because in that case, that wouldn't work so well. Ace Gaming, thank you for create such great content for free. You're welcome. That's what we do here, is create a lot of content with no strings attached and Nothing at all. So thank you very much for your support. I really appreciate that. If you're on Discord, let one of my team members know you can get a supporter role. Thanks for that. So yeah, the long answer is that there may come a time where you're going to use a tool. Like a perfect example is if you're using Bootstrap with React and you are using something like Bootbox, or actually really just any of the tools within Bootstrap, like you're going to have to call into an element with jQuery. So like one example I use is date picker. So if you have a date picker and you need to activate that field to be a date picker, then you're going to have to use jQuery here, because the date picker exposes their interface to making things a date picker, with jQuery. So in this case, it's perfectly fine. But yeah, you can use them together. There's no, like you're not going to get shunned by your peers for calling, some jQuery function from within React. It's perfectly fine. I do it all the time. It's all good. Next one, we kind of touched on this. This was asked, this is one of the two most popular questions in here. The second was how to use it. And it was, how does React differ from something like Angular or Vue.js? There's so many options, I often don't know what to do. This was submitted by Big Dude 4, Joel, and one unknown person. So it's like we talked about above. It differs in three primary ways. We talked about the opinions. Angular is very opinionated, React much less so, and then Vue.js is somewhere in between. I would not describe Vue.js as unopinionated, but I also wouldn't describe it as super opinionated like Angular. So it's somewhere in the middle. One other big way it differs is in data binding. And when we talk about data binding, we talk about how the data model goes from the data model down to the rendered HTML. So when we speak about one-way data binding, we're talking about the model renders the HTML. When we speak about two-way data binding, we talk about that I just described, plus being able to make changes in the HTML, which will update the model. With Vue.js and Angular, those are two-way data binding. With React, it's just one-way, which means that you could still update the model from HTML, but it's not in the same way. Like with Angular, you can make a text box and you could just say, attach this text box value to this model property. And then if you update the model property, it updates the text box. If you update the text box, it updates the model property. With React, only one of those is true. If you update the text box, it doesn't immediately update the model property. And when we look at the React example a little bit later, we're going to see exactly how that works. And then finally, the big way it differs is in size. And again, this is related to opinions. Of course, React does one thing very well, components, and not much else, and thus it's not as large. Whereas Angular is super batteries included. You get all the tools up front, and they expect you to use them in a specific way. Like Angular is not a tool where you can kind of, use at will. You either have to go full send on it or not use it at all. And that's sort of problematic in some cases. Some people don't like that. I don't like that, mostly because I don't want to get invested in such a large tool. I'd rather just use something that's really flexible for the exact things that I need, which is, converting all my nasty jQuery, DOM manipulation code into something that's a lot more maintainable in React. That's where I personally see an extraordinary amount of value. Okay, this will be the last question before we look at an example, just because this kind of relates to our example. So in fact, this may just be a segue to our actual React practical example. So, hey, can you please go over the process for transpiling JSX to JS? Thanks, Dad. And this was submitted by Unknown. And to that I say, son, this one is quite simple. You use Babel, and you use, oh, sorry, my stream crashed here. Hold on. Or my browser crashed, rather. Just give me a sec. Oh my goodness. Brave browser just suddenly closed on me. I lost my chat. Okay. So the way you do that is with Babel and with React presets, and it's quite simple. You use it with a bundler, or you can just use it on your own. The most common way is to use it with a bundler like Webpack or Gulp or Browserify, and what those do is those take your JSX, they convert them to JavaScript, they wrap them up in the bundle, and they make them ready to just drop into your web page and be done with it. And the cool thing is that when you write JavaScript or React, you can use the most modern JavaScript and React that's available, which is fantastic. You don't have to write browser code to make it work. Webpack and Babel, they'll handle all that, and it will do. No, I'm not binning the Brave browser. No way. That's like the first time it's ever crashed, I think, ever. I think it has something to do with my system. I'll fix that later. Now, Brave browser is the best. Brave.com. Get on it. Ditch your Chrome. So yeah, the workflow is typically you'd write some JSX. Webpack would transpile the JSX, bundle it into a single JS file, which would then be included in your HTML. So I want to shift over to the actual practical example of that, just so you can see kind of how all that works. Now, after this stream, I'm going to push up into the Git repo, which will be in the description. I'm going to push a very bare bones basic example that contains Webpack, JavaScript, JSX, and then less. Bundles it all up into one file, and there's basically this thing right here. I made a to-do list where I can check different items, add new items, and whatnot. And this is going to be our React example. And you'll be able to download this and run it yourself. It's not super complicated, but this will be kind of how it goes. So the tools that we need to make this happen are Babel. So Babel's going to be our tool that allows us to actually do the conversion of JSX to JS, modern JS to JS, and then bundle it all together. That's going to be the primary tool that's going to be used. Our Babel loader, CSS loader, less loader, and style loader, these are all going to be related to actual Webpack and how it goes about the bundling, but not necessarily in the actual conversion. Like you can use Babel without Webpack. It's just you would then have to bundle it on your own, and you may not wish to do that. Mini CSS extract plugin, we can just ignore that for now, but the intent for that is to just take all the less files, extract them, place them in one file, because it's not really conversion. Like it goes from less to CSS, but then this is just in the way that Webpack works. This one you wouldn't actually need if you weren't using Webpack, so we can just ignore that for now. And as far as React, we're just going to include React, which we'll be able to import into any of our files. And then, of course, we need Webpack, which does our bundling. So these are the ones you need if you use Webpack. And then as far as how things get bundled, that all happens in our Webpack config. So for in our Webpack config, we have a number of things, and the one of the most important things we have is our entry point. And I don't want to get too crazy into Webpack. I've done a video that's exclusively on Webpack, so you could certainly check that out. But the entry point is nothing more than where does your JavaScript start execution from? And oh, hold on a second. Okay, that's kind of where the execution starts from, is your index.js file. And all my index.js file really has is it has a bunch of includes for all my JS, JSX, and less files. And then the rest of this is just rules. You know, like the first rule is it says take JS and JSX files, run them through Babel loader. You know, take less files and run them through CSS and less loader. And then finally for the resolve, this just has to do with modules. This is not actually in the building. This is so I can import other modules from within a different component. And then the output is where it says what it should send it to. So it says output it to the dist directory and call it name.bundle.js. And then for the extract plugin, name.bundle.css. So what this ends up resulting in, and I'm sorry I can't kind of blow up this tree view here, but I have a dist folder, And in here, I have a main.bundle.js. I don't have a main.bundle.css because I have no less files, but if I did, I would. And in this main.bundle.js is just all kinds of different things. It has my code, it has some library code like React, because it has to include all the React stuff in here, but it's all done through one single file. And that's the cool thing. Because when we ultimately do go into our index.html file, where we actually inflate our React component, we see that we include this main.bundle.js. And this is the only thing that we need to include. It doesn't matter if we have 100 files, 100 JSX files, 1,000 JSX files, it doesn't make a difference. It's going to bundle it up into this one place, and then we can include it here. So as far as our actual JSX file, our project looks like this. It's just a to-do list. It has a list of things, and it has done, and then a yes or a no. So with this application, I can add something, like walk chase, and click add, and you can see that it adds a new item. Or throw a ball for chase, click add, adds new item. And then if I want to tick the items, I can tick them, and you can see that it changes no to yes. So all this is done through React. I didn't write any jQuery for this. I didn't write any vanilla JS for this. It's all just plain old React. And if you've ever built UIs or things like this before, you could probably identify that this is actually kind of a complex piece of code. If you were to do this with just jQuery, this would be kind of a tough thing to do, and it would be kind of messy because you're having to access basically HTML arrays of items by using something like jQuery map or for each or something like that. So this could be kind of hard, but let's look at what this looked like in React. So I have my JSX file here, which is React, and one of the big things is the state. And in the state, I have a to-do array, and I have 2 items in that to-do array. And each of the items in the array has a name and a done. And what I'm really doing is when I tick this box, what it does is it comes into the state and it changes done from true to false, or it changes done from false to true. And then once it does that, React just sort of goes and updates that. So like literally all I'm doing is I'm updating this property from true to false. That's it. In fact, we can look down here in my function that does that, update done, is I'm going through every item in the to-do. I'm saying if the submitted ID matches the current ID in the iteration, then item.done equals opposite of item.done. So true becomes false, false becomes true, and that's it. So this is our single change that we're making. There is no like jQuery searching, there is no updating of text fragments or anything like that. It's just I change false to true, and then React will efficiently re-render it. So as far as how it's rendered, this is really it. And this is, remember we talked about how one of the big things about React is its ability to combine HTML and JavaScript in a non-brain damage way. And this is kind of, ordinarily anybody who uses who used jQuery a lot knows that putting HTML inside JavaScript, like as a string, is just really, really awful. It leads to some really bad code and big messes. But in this case, it's completely allowed, and it's also very logical. It acts more like a templating engine than it does like embedding HTML in JavaScript. Although my HTML is in fact in my JavaScript file, it looks a lot like it just looks like it should be there. It looks like it belongs here. So all we've really done here is we're mapping over every item in our to-do list, or array rather, and then for every item we're returning a div. And in that div, we have a couple of things. We have our input box, which has a checked value of the value of item.done. So this is sort of, remember, inversion of control. We're taking the property from the to-do array called done, and we're using that to determine whether or not this box should be checked. And then when you check this box, rather than just saying the box should be checked, you're actually updating the state to say that it is now done and that it should now be checked. And likewise, item.done is either going to be a yes or no, depending on whether it's done or not. And that can be done just like this. So it's all very logical, it all makes sense, and then we can output the name here. So just by checking the box changes two things. It changes whether or not the checked box is checked, but it also changes whether or not it says it's done or not. So it's kind of cool. It didn't take a whole lot of code to do what you see here. And you can make really complex UIs with just this tool, and they come out really good. So like the entirety of our HTML is really just these lines here. It all fits on one, screen with the text blown up by 20 times. So kind of cool. As far as the text here again, when we want to add a new item, we're adding the value into this box, but the value of the box doesn't change. What we're actually doing is we're saying when the text in the box changes, call this function called item text. And when that function is called, you can see that it updates the state with the new value from the box called add item text. And then when we go to add an item, you can see that that's used in two spots. So it sets the value back to nothing, and then it takes the value and inserts it as a new to-do item, with a default as done. And that's kind of it. That's the whole thing. So you should experiment this if you want. But this is a really simple example. It's a total of 94 lines of code, including the actual rendering. And I actually built this between the time that I woke up and the time the stream started. So it didn't take me too long. You can build seemingly complex things pretty fast. So definitely check this out. I will push this up to GitHub after the stream, and you can have a look. Okay, next question. What are the best practices with using React? How to structure files, how to prevent spaghetti code, etc. This is asked by Avi12. So one of the best practices I can think of about React is not making huge React components. So remember, the purpose of React is to be a collection of components that operate kind of independently from one another. And the best way you can make a good React app is to know when you should start making new components. And of course, you don't want to go overboard. You don't want to take something that could be one component and make it 6 components. You got to kind of think of like, what logical sections in my application could kind of manage themselves. So one example I can think of is on the Emkc, for instance, there's a bunch of places on that site where it's the person's avatar, the person's name, and the amount of power they have. So, like, logically speaking, that made perfect sense that that should be a component. And that component should take in a prop of the information about the user, and then it should intelligently render what it should render from there. And then it just sort of manages it itself. So that makes sense that that should be a component. And you can also figure out kind of like what, when you should make more components based on if you're doing duplicate stuff. So just like normal programming, the whole dry principle, don't repeat yourself. So if you're doing duplicate code in just normal programming like Python or JavaScript on the back end, then of course it makes sense to maybe make a function, abstract that code out to that function, and then call into that function as opposed to duplicating the code. And the same thing's true with React. If you find yourself writing duplicate HTML, it might be time to make a component out of that. Yeah, split by continuous components, actions, services, and helpers. Yeah, there's a number of things. Can't stand React. I hate it so much. You should post in the chat why you hate it. I do know of people who don't like it, but a lot of times I met a lot of people who just didn't use it long enough. They didn't give it a chance. And I was one of those people. Like the first time somebody tried to sell me on React, they're like, "You should try React." And I pulled up the introduction, I pull up the introduction page and I tried their beginner tutorial and I worked through that a little bit and I was like, this is ridiculous. You know, this is just HTML and JavaScript. It sucks. I don't like it. I'm done with it. In fact, actually, Pyro, who's in the chat, I actually credit him for finally getting me into React, because when I was building out Emkc, I was not building it with React, and he suggested I try it again. And then finally, when I started to get into it and I started to make it work, I was like, wow, this is actually game changing. So if you don't like React, maybe just because you tried it once and didn't like it, I'd say maybe circle back and maybe give it another shot, because it's a really good tool, and I use it everywhere now. No more jQuery, no more jQuery for the stuff that I can now do in React. I still use jQuery for things, but yep, no problem. 100% for sure. You are the reason why I'm using React today. There's no ifs, ands, or buts about that. And Emkc was the first project that I ever did as a big React project. So you can have a look at that. And okay, so as far as file structure goes, the second part of this question was, what about file structure? So here again, this is where React is very unopinionated. You can store your files however you want. It doesn't force you into any particular structure. You can do it however you want. In the end, it's all going to get bundled up into one spot. And then as far as including, you know, components from various places, you can just use the import statement to pull in whatever you want to pull in. So yeah, however you want. It's, you know, I like to separate mine based on purpose, and I like to separate out ones that are common. But here again, like if you don't like the structure later on down the road, you can just move them and then just update, you know, your references, and you know, all will be fine. Yep, React feels horribly backwards at first, but it all makes sense once you get into the groove. That's 100% correct. That is exactly how I feel too. You got to give it a chance. It's my one piece of advice. Give it a chance. Use it for more than 5 minutes. And I say that because 5 minutes is about as far as I got, you know, the first 3 times I tried it. So give it a solid college try. You know, give it a try in a small project. Okay, I'm going to answer some of the questions from the chat. They're actually stacking up on me here. Start from the top. Can you make mobile apps and front end from website from React and desktop apps from Electron? Yes. So you can use React in the browser and also in Electron kind of as is. The thing that I showed you here, my to-do list, you could use that in Electron, no problem. As far as React Native, which is going to be what you'd use for mobile apps, React in React Native does work in mostly the same way. It's just they've kind of fit it into the mold of mobile apps. So there's some slight differences, but you'll find that a lot of it is pretty much the same. So the short answer is yes, you can use React pretty much everywhere. But keep in mind that, you know, React in mobile is called React Native. Okay. Isaiah asked, let's say we have a parent functional component using useState with a number of child components with their own useState. How can we reset all child components to the initial state via the parent? So generally, what you would do is you have to decide kind of where, you know, who owns the authority on the data. So if you have a parent component called, say, posts, and then you have a child component called, say, comment, and then you have a child component of that called comment, and you have a child component of that called user, then you got to decide at what point in that big chain, you know, who owns the official set of data, you know, who owns all that. And oftentimes it would be the parent. It would be posts. You know, posts will own the list of posts, and then it will push all that down to the children. So how you'd reset all child components would just be to just set the state in the parent to what it was at the beginning, and that should be it. If your React app was designed properly, then that should just be pushed all the way down to all the children, and they will just go back to their state that they were in the beginning. Now, there's a slight, wrench in the gears there, and that if children maintain their own state as well, this gets a little challenging. In that case, what you'd have to do is you'd have to actually look and say, all right, well, have I gotten enough info from the parent to render what I need to render? And if not, then you might be able to treat it as kind of, okay, well, I'm in an initial state. So if I'm in an initial state, then I need to take care of that to make sure that I don't render anything that was specific to, the change version. I feel like I described that wrong. So it's like, imagine you've rendered 3 posts as opposed to 0, and then the child component, up for user updates some value for the user. You kind of want to look at that and say, okay, well, I have no post now, which means that rendering the user doesn't matter. Yeah, where is state manager? It really is tough, and it's actually so tough that I'm having trouble answering this specific question, because typically what I do is I design what I want to design first, and then I sort of optimize it from there, and then I make it make sense from there. But for me, it takes actually building everything out before I fully understand, what things need to become components and where the state's managed and whatnot. But yeah, Ray, you're absolutely right. That is for sure one of the toughest parts. But it all starts to make sense. I try to just make it logical, but the short answer to your question is just you should be able to just revert the parent state to the initial, and then it should update the children. No problem. I am an Angular, Stephen S. I'm an Angular dev wondering whether to learn React 2. Care to express an opinion? So to use Angular and React, I don't think that works super well. Also because, again, Angular. Now, I don't know if it's Angular JS or if it's Angular 4 or 5. Of course, there's differences. Angular has had a lot of, they went from Angular JS to Angular 2 to Angular 4 to Angular 5. Maybe even beyond now. Should you learn both? I mean, it's always good to broaden kind of your skill set, but if you're wondering, should I learn both so that I use both at the same time? I would say no. I think you got to kind of pick one or the other. React or Angular, which is best in performance? I don't have the data on that. If I were to venture a guess, I would say React performs better, and I would just say that because React is doing less. I don't know if that's accurate or not. I don't have the data right in front of me, but that's my guess. If anybody knows which is actually faster, definitely submit something in the chat here. Do you think React is better than Android Studio? So, I mean, the reason Android Studio exists to begin with is because they wanted you to have a visual way to kind of build these XML view fragments and, combine them with Java or Kotlin, to create their full thing. So the purpose of Android Studio is to be a one-stop shop to create native Android apps in either Java or Kotlin. So if you're building a React Native app, you don't really have a use for that, because part of what React Native is doing is it's placing an abstraction on top of kind of Android and iOS native app development. So you don't really need to know how to develop, view fragments in Android, because you're not going to use them in React Native. You'll do it the React Native way. So we don't really need to even compare the two. I mean, I don't have really any experience doing React Native. However, I have a bunch of experience doing Android Native. I've made a bunch of apps, some of them on the App Store, some of them are popular, some of them are not. I've probably built 6 or 7 apps, of which 2 or 3 of them I'm like very proud of because they came out really good and they're just really good apps. So I could say that Android Studio is very easy to use. And is React Native easier? Probably not for me, just because I've never done it. But I think they're both fine. You know, if you're building in React Native, you're probably just using Expo and Atom Editor or VS Code or whatever. Isaac asked, how are websites usually developed? Using a text editor or any other IDE? So you can use either. The only real difference between an IDE and a text editor is how much additional stuff it does for you. So when I think of a text editor, all I'm really thinking of is syntax highlighting, you know, a tree view, maybe some basic autocomplete, something like that. And that's really it. When I think of an IDE, I start thinking of like, you know, you can attach a database connection to your editor. And then like if you're making a SQL file in your editor and you start typing, it'll autocomplete like a table name, you know, from the database connection. You know, that would be an integration between your editor and your database. And then it's not just that. You know, so IDEs aim to be kind of one-stop shops to do everything. You know, IDE might contain a way to interact with Git. It might contain a way to interact with a dev server. It might contain a way to talk to a database, talk to an object store, talk to whatever. So typically websites just develop with text editors, but they can also be developed with IDEs. It doesn't really matter. You just pick the editor you like the best, whether that's Vim or Atom or VS Code, PyCharm, whatever. Zach Cook, yeah, Titus Deer, yep, directions unclear. Got React stuck in Titus Deer. Thanks a lot for the 20. I appreciate that. Yeah, Ray Wise. If you aren't 110% committed to React, then GTFO. Yeah, I mean, you know, here again, it's all tools. You know, it's all tools. There's so many tools out there. It's not, you know, keep in mind, this stream is not like, I'm not evangelizing React. There's a possibility that I'll do a stream on Angular as well. Like I like to just do deep dives on certain things and take questions. So, you know, I don't try to like me personally, and I do this in my community and all that. I'm trying not to. I'm not trying to like force you into any particular thing. You know, never come to my streams and think that I'm just like evangelizing something super hard and fanboying React or anything. I can only speak from experience, how it's helped me, and hopefully maybe it can help you. And I try to give objective opinions on, you know, between React and other tools and whatnot. But I also try not to speak on things that I don't have a lot of knowledge on, you know, so I've built exactly one Angular 5 app. So that's the extent of my knowledge. And I know that I suffered a great deal doing so. And so that's the sort of thing that I want to, you know, convey to people. Also, thanks again for the 20, Zach. You've supported me so much, both in the Discord and in all things. So thanks a lot for that. I appreciate it. Sound of Silence said, how does React work with the Django? So it works in the same way as any other backend. You know, so remember, React is a front-end tool, whereas the Django is a backend tool. So like React doesn't actually even care what's on the backend. React will work fine with Django, work fine with Node, Java, PHP, Ruby, anything. So it doesn't matter what's on the backend. In fact, React can just, you know, you can make single page apps in React, meaning that you're literally just loading in one div and letting React just inflate the whole thing by calling into web services like APIs built in whatever, whether it's Node.js, Python, whatever. So it works. you don't really have to like make React work with the Django. The workflow is the same. You know, React pulls in data from Django, Django sends data back to React, and React renders it in some way. The D is silent. Is it? I actually never knew that. So it's just a Django, huh? Okay. Nice. Thanks for that. I've been calling it, my whole life has been a lie. I've been calling it the Django my entire life. Okay, I still have another like 8 or 9 questions from submitted, but I want to make sure I get through the submitted questions as well. Yeah. Things that were more simple back then when the marquee was cool. Yeah. I actually, if you haven't watched my web design, but it's 1998 again, it's a really fun video that covers the marquee tag. So enjoy. Anu asks, is it possible to host a React website on GitHub pages? I've seen an article about it, but I've never gotten it to work. And the answer is absolutely. I think where people get this wrong is they try to do it without using the GH pages package. So if you use the GH pages package, that should bundle up all your stuff properly to work good with GitHub pages. I haven't personally tried this, but I know that this is one of the common problems because I've looked into it. This isn't the first time I've been asked this, but I don't use GitHub pages, so I can't speak from experience. But I do know that the official instructions says you should use GH pages. So I think that's all you got to do. I got kind of a bug question here from Unknown. Hey Chase, hey buddy. It says, I get this weird bug where arrays of elements are rendered out of order or incorrectly. Any ideas? And as soon as I saw this question, I immediately knew what it was, because when I first started using React, I messed something up pretty bad that caused this exact problem where my stuff was rendering out of order or not rendering at all. And I know exactly why this occurred. So you got to kind of think of how like React renders arrays. Like take our example here. We have 4 items. If I were to remove the third item, you know, how does React know that that's the third item? How does it know that it should remove that one? Because it doesn't have a unique identifier. It's literally just a div with a name, you know, with text in it called walk chase and done equals 0. And what I was messing up is I was not using the key attribute. So if we look back in our whoops, not that one. So look back on our file. We can see down our loop here. You can see in our to-do loop, you can see I have this key attribute and I've set it to the index. So this is just going to be 0, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, whatever. Excuse me. And this is how you solve that problem. By using this, you're basically telling React that this item is item number 1. So when it comes down to re-rendering it, it already has it uniquely identified in this way. Now, the key attribute is not required. It's not technically an error to not use it, because in a lot of cases, React can figure it out for itself and everything will be fine. But where it gets kind of messed up is when the data looks the same. Imagine I had, well, let me just do it. So if I add a second thing here, I'll do a duplicate called pet chase. So I've added a second one now. I have two pet chases now. And this is where it gets problematic, because how does it know which one to update? They're exactly the same. And it knows it because I've made it unique by supplying the key property. Key is also used for telling the children to be force rendered. I actually did not know that, but that's good information. Thank you for that. Yeah, generally not best practice to use indexes as keys. So in this case, I don't have another unique way. Like I wouldn't want to use the name as the unique, because the name could be not unique. So in this case, the index is in fact my unique thing. But I'm glad you brought that up. If you had an ID, which I do not, so like if you're loading in data from a database, like say you're loading in 5 pictures from a database and you had like image ID equals 5,000, image ID equals 5,320, image ID equals whatever, then that is what you'd want to put here, because that will indeed be unique. So if you have a unique ID, you should use that. If you don't have anything, then you can use the index. It's fine, or use nothing at all. You know, it'll figure it out in most cases. Thank you for that. I appreciate that. 20. I think that's India. Thanks for joining the stream. I appreciate that. Can you demonstrate your Atom theme? So my Atom theme is actually just default. If you download Atom from atom.io, it's going to look exactly like I have here. So I actually haven't adjusted at all. This uses Atom 1 Dark, which I believe is the default. So yeah, just download Atom and you're good to go. Another question, and this was actually asked by a couple people. I only put it on this one just because this was the actual question, but it seems there's a library for everything in React, but sometimes I find it easier to use vanilla JS or CSS for many things, e.g. local storage, CSS transitions, and other things like selectors and utility functions. Is it an anti-pattern to step out of the React way and use vanilla JS and CSS? Maybe creating utility functions, importing them as needed. Thanks a lot. Really appreciate you doing these for us. Cheers. Asked by, I think, Joao, I think is the name. So fortunately, React is very unopinionated about interactions with other tools, you know, like we showed earlier. So it's perfectly fine to write part of your app with vanilla JS and part in React. It's completely fine. They're going to interact, you know, with no problems. A lot of times what I do is I will actually write generic JavaScript functionality, which I will then include in my React files just as a typical module. And then from there, I can use that to do whatever. And that's just vanilla JS. The only thing, you know, the only problematic thing, and we covered this earlier, is try not to write code that interferes with React's rendering of items. Because if you do that, you know, you're going to end up with some stuff's going to happen that you're not going to like, you know, and because once you break React's kind of rendering thing, it's not going to know what to do. So you can't really expect, you know, for that to work at that point. Second question was around server-side rendering. We sort of talked about this. He mentioned Next.js and Gatsby. You know, when choosing either of these over good old client-server rendering with React, you know, here again, both are React frameworks, which offer, you know, an abstraction on top of React. This is the same as like Redux. So, you know, whether you choose one of these or not, I don't personally have any experience with Gatsby. And in fact, I had no knowledge of Gatsby until I got this question. But I took a second to look it up just so I could, you know, speak about it a little bit. And I've looked at Next.js before, so I kind of know what that's up to. But what it comes down to is the choice whether to use one of these comes down to whether you like using frameworks because they have functionality that makes sense for your use case, and whether or not it's actually valid for what you're trying to do. So that's what I'd say about that. In terms of using one or the other, it's just which one fits your use case best, I would say. Have I worked in OPC for industrial control systems? No. Most of my knowledge is in rapid prototyping for startups. I've worked in high volume background checks. I've worked in environmental monitoring, and I've worked in commercial mail service for the most part. That's the major things. I've done hundreds of projects outside of that though. Okay, we got 1 minute left, but we're gonna go a little bit over. Sorry about that. We'll probably end up going about 10-15 minutes late. I want to get through these two questions, and I want to try to get through all the questions in the chat. I'll do the best I can to get them all. So stepping out a bit from React, would you recommend learning a React Native if we're already familiar with React over mobile native technologies like Kotlin? So I think what he meant was over native technologies like you know, Android Studio and Xcode. You know, Kotlin's just a language. Kotlin and Java you can use interchangeably for Android development. What's the terminal I use? It's actually just XFCE for terminal. It's just the basic one. Yeah, I don't use anything crazy. If you use Xubuntu and you type terminal in the search, then you will you will get that terminal. So as far as which do I recommend, I actually quite like native mobile development, but that could just be because I've never made anything major with React Native. I feel like I'm very good at making Android apps, so I tend to just do that. However, I have no knowledge of iOS apps. That's the problem. So if I was a publisher of applications, I'd be in big trouble. I'd have to probably get the iOS version built by a contractor or something like that. And actually, in my professional life, that's a lot of times what I'll do is, if I'm asked to build, mobile applications, typically what I'll do is I'll build the Android version, which will also serve as the prototype for the iOS version. And then I'll send that out to a contractor and I'll ask them to clone the Android version into an iOS version and make that work. But it could, I might be increasing the cost or extending the time on that. So I don't know. Ben asked, Ian, why are you so awesome? I don't think I am awesome. I just really enjoy this. So I like conveying the knowledge to everybody. So, but if you think I'm awesome, I really appreciate that. Thank you. But React Native comes with challenges though. And I think this is a lot of times why, like mentally, I'm always avoiding it is because, and it's funny, somebody brought up Xamarin Forms in the chat. Like Xamarin, I had a really bad experience with Xamarin. I don't think that tool is good at all, and I speak from experience on that. I had a bad experience with it, and it really soured my taste for that technology, and probably in a way it kind of soured my taste for this idea of write your code base once and then you get applications in a bunch of platforms. However, my faith has been restored slightly by experimenting with React Native. So, Patu, thanks for the €5. Enjoyed my first stream. Here's some peanuts. Keep it up. Thank you. I appreciate that. And I hope you attend the next stream. We do these typically once a month, for everybody watching, once a month generally. Usually the first Saturday of each month, but this was kind of a weird one. I had to cancel the previous one because nobody submitted questions, and then some personal life matters cropped up 2 weeks ago, so I had to skip that one as well. But definitely attend the next one. Happy to have you. the cap of awesomeness. Yeah, this cap is actually just a meme now. I don't always wear a hat, but I've worn a hat for 100% of my streams, and 100%. Actually, what I'll do is I'll do a hair reveal right now. See, I actually have hair. Everybody says like, "Oh, you wear a hat because you're bald." I'm not bald. I got hair. So there you go. That's a rare engineer man hair reveal. So as far as mobile, as far as native versus React Native, if anybody's on Discord and has the Discord mobile app, then that's written in React Native, and it is a beautiful app, in my opinion. I think the Discord Android app is really, really sharp and really, really good looking. So yeah, Ian kind of looks like Adam Sandler without the hat. Yes, that's actually Adam Sandler is the number one celebrity that I have been compared to in my life, for the most part. Yeah, it's funny. And the final question that was submitted is asked by Mikey. Hi, EM. How do I know when I should make new components? Rather, make a new component. So we talked about this a little bit. If it's duplicate HTML, then you want to make a new component. And if it makes sense for the way your application is structured, then you'll want to make a new component for that, especially if the component can kind of manage itself. The more a component can manage itself, the better your code is ultimately going to look, and the better your application is ultimately going to be structured. Okay, so that's it for the submitted questions. I'm going to go through the questions in the chat, and then we should be wrapping up here in about 5 to 10 minutes. Question: I have nothing against bald people. I am not bald, although people think I am, because I'm always wearing a hat, and they think there's nothing under there, but there is. So Okay, moving on. Let's see. Websites. Okay, I got that one done. Top 5 things I'd use React for. I don't know if I can come up with a top 5 in this short period of time, but I would use React for almost everything now. I don't even know when I would not pick React for front end stuff. Probably if it was just too simple. If it was just some simple thing that I didn't want to like break out React, for it, maybe I wouldn't do it. But for any for any sizable project that has a lot of DOM manipulation, I'm going to immediately reach for React for sure. And I'm going to do so almost without even considering the use case, because it's, which is different than if I was choosing Angular, because React's not opinionated. Like I can use React for just one single component and then not use it anywhere else, and that's perfectly fine, in the React way, because it's not opinionated. So you can use it where you want to use it. You cannot use it where you don't want to use it, and all is well. What's your distro? My distro is Xubuntu. I use Xubuntu Linux. I use Atom Editor, and that's pretty much it. To what extent could I use React? The whole way. You could use React anywhere from one single component on one single page all the way up to a single page application that's 100% in React, as well as building entire mobile applications entirely in React. I use Arch, by the way. Yep. There's actually a lot of Arch, by the way, people. Have you heard about micro front end? Is another buzzword. I haven't. I haven't heard about that. But it makes sense. It makes sense. I mean, there's microservices, which deliver a very small subset of functionality over an API. So it makes sense that there could be micro front ends, which deliver a very small subsection of a front end. I guess it's possible. I don't know exactly what that means. I'm just speculating as to what that might mean in practice. Can you show us examples of how you structure your files for a project? So I would say just look at the example code. I wish I could blow up the tree view. Like I can only zoom my text. I can't zoom the tree view over here. But for the most part, I have a source folder, I have a JS folder, I have a JSX folder, and I have a less folder. And then there, I just make folders according to what makes sense in my application. So if I have like an admin section, I might put an admin folder and make sure that all the admin related components are in that. And that's how I'll just structure things. So I don't do anything crazy. I just make it so a lot of times I'll actually make my folders for JSX match my typical just view templates that the backend renders, just so I know like where everything goes. But not always. It just depends on the project. Can you explain Webpack and React? So I did that. That's already been covered. I covered that. That question was asked twice. Why don't you use Emkc create React app? I think just because I have boilerplate React stuff that I use already that I just copy and paste as a starting point, so I don't necessarily need that. There's no technical reason though. If you're not sure how to get started, create React app is a fantastic way to just have like an instant, React app that gives you a starting point. What about Parcel? I've actually never heard of Parcel. If you would let me know in the chat exactly what Parcel is. I'm actually not sure what that is. How comfortable are you with using arrow functions instead of normal in class components to avoid typing this .bind every time? So, you can. That's actually a good question. I've tried to sort that out. I'm actually not entirely sure what the right answer to that is. I know that, so what he's talking about, just for context for everybody watching. So in my JSX file, you'll notice up here, I had to do this.add equals this.add.bind this. And I had to do this because inside my add function, I make a call to this.setState. And the problem is this does not point to where it needs to be. So what's required here is to do this.add equals this.add.bind.this. Now, it's entirely possible that they've solved that in a later version of React, but at the time I started using React, this was unfortunately the idiomatic way to make that work. Anywhere that you had to access this in a function other than like the constructor or the lifecycle callbacks like component did mount or component did update or something like that, you had to actually bind this manually. And hopefully that's been solved now. Since you're mentioning it, I'm assuming it has been solved, so I need to go back and look at that again. What apps did you make? I'm probably going to keep those private only because it would indicate both my location and like my professional endeavors. I don't have any like ones that have my name on it. It's all stuff that I've built for other organizations. Thanks. Yeah, info Angular 10. Wait, there's 10? There's an Angular 10 now. It's now just referred to Angular. AngularJS, yeah, like the first Angular I ever used was actually AngularJS, so Angular 1. And then I didn't use any of them again until Angular 5. The naming collisions and overlap is unfortunate. Yeah. Okay, I think we're pretty much to the end here. Ah, yes, great question. Thank you from Raul. What do you do to reduce the size of the JavaScript file to get faster load times using React? So you wouldn't do that through React, you do that through Webpack. So whatever, or another bundler, not necessarily Webpack, it could be done with any bundler. So the question is around, what would happen if you had tens of thousands of lines and hundreds of thousands of lines of library code, and you had all this, and it was creating just this massive main.bundle.file, and the answer is called chunking. And what chunking allows you to do is it allows you to bundle assets separately from one another. So one of the most common things to do is to bundle all of your vendor stuff, like React and React DOM and Axios and whatever other stuff you need, bundle that separately from your library code. And what this allows you to do is when you rebuild the stuff, the vendor bundle will stay the same, but your app bundle will change. And oftentimes your app bundle is going to be the smallest one that there is. And then this has the benefit of when you finally do get into the browser will cache the vendor bundle and it won't have to re-download it, and it will only have to re-download your app bundle. And in this way you can significantly speed up the loading times versus if it's all in one bundle. If you make just a one line change to your app, it has to rebundle everything, which could be multiple megabytes. So that's one way to do it. And there's strategies for chunking the different files. You can chunk it by module, you can chunk it by purpose, you can manually specify what goes in each chunks. You can also make it so it chunks it into multiple files, and then you just load one file which loads the remainder. So there's a lot of different strategies that allow you to split the code among a bunch of files and load it efficiently as possible in the browser. It just depends on the tool. That's not a feature of React. That's going to be a tool of the bundler. Like React itself does not. React certainly doesn't make any opinions on how you go about bundling it into the browser. And I think that's pretty much. Oh, a couple more. What's the limit of React? None, as far as I know. And have you looked at Flutter? Yes, I have. I looked at Flutter around the same time as I looked at React Native, but that was some time ago. I need to probably circle back and look at it again because the last time I looked at it, there wasn't a whole lot of people talking about it. So I think it's probably time to give it a second look. Oh, I missed yours. I don't actually see any additional questions. Just ask it in the chat real quick. I don't know if something's wrong with the bot. I don't see any additional questions from you. But that's pretty much it. If anybody has any last second questions, go ahead and ask them in the chat. Now is your opportunity. But this is kind of React in a nutshell. There's a lot of really cool things about it and a lot of really cool strengths about it. And if you're the type of person that likes a tool that's really purpose built, then it's a good one. Oh, do you think React standard state management is enough, or is Redux necessary? I haven't really used Redux in any major capacity, so I'm not entirely sure exactly, what it offers. Have I used Svelte? No, I haven't. It's funny, like there's so many tools and I haven't even seen them. What's going on here? What's your thoughts on Preact? Again, never heard of it. Crazy. I'm actually glad everybody's bringing up all these because it means I need to go and I need to research some of this. There's probably some good tools in the making. I know I've been using React now for probably 2 years. There are a couple pain points that I do run into every now and again, and it is possible that these could be solved with some of these tools that have been mentioned in the chat. So I appreciate mentioning these because I'm definitely going to check it out. As far as the interview questions, if I have 2 separate use effects and they get triggered to run at the same time, what happens? Which runs first, or do they run at the exact same time? So the one thing I will say for sure is that because JavaScript is single-threaded, they would not run at the same time. As far as which would run first, that's a good question, actually. I'm not entirely sure. I would assume the one that... I mean, because of the way JavaScript works, things run concurrently, so you could technically have 2 effects running at the same time, and it just sort of like switches back and forth between them to run them. I would assume that effects are not triggered synchronously, but I suppose it could be wrong. You can have 100 use effect that happen as one. Nice. You should check out React Context along with Redux too. Nice. It's a lot of good stuff here. See, I give you guys good info, you give me good info. So it's a give and take. Awesome. Okay. Well, I think we could pretty much wrap up here. I just want to leave you with this. So if you want to get involved in the Engineer Man community, especially if you're first time here, definitely attend future streams. If you want to come take it further, chat on the Engineer Man Discord. And then please take part in these contests. I'm telling you, they're so fun. They really are. Everybody's having a really good time. I thought a lot of them were going to be not even close. I thought somebody was going to have some crazy solution, but over time, people just kept optimizing and optimizing and optimizing all the way to the very end. So, yeah, it's definitely check those out. It's a lot of fun. Come in and flex some crazy programming skill. Plus, we are going to add additional languages. We're going to add like actual code golfing languages to the mix just to make it even more interesting. But here again, you can compete by submitting the best solution per language. So if you're just a Java developer, of course, Java code is often a lot longer than other code. And if you want to just compete with other Java developers, you can do that. You don't have to. You could still get an award by producing the best Java solution, even if it's 500 characters more than the main solution. So I think it'll be good. Definitely check it out. I'll post a link to the Discord. If you are not there, you should consider being there. I think there is close to 13,000 people there now, with roughly 2,500 online at any given moment. So it's very active. There's new members all the time. Roughly 120 new people every 2 days come to the Discord server, and there's a lot of engagement, a lot of things happening. Got a fantastic team there, and you will find me there. I'm constantly chatting. In fact, I'm the most active person in my own server. So you will see me helping people and discussing things and doing various stuff. Donovan, don't know JS at all. Lots of Googling to follow. Super magic cap funds. Thank you. I actually need a new cap. This one's getting a little faded. So, yep. Thank you. I know you're already a supporter in the chat. I appreciate that. I know you've been to like nearly all the streams. So thank you so much. Happy to have you, of course. And I hope you and everybody else continues to join the streams month after month, week after week. So, yeah. So the last thing will be, we'll probably do the next stream in 1 month from now, maybe 3 weeks from now, just to kind of get ourselves back on pace. If you want to influence what happens on the stream, you can do so on the Discord server in the channel called Stream-Planning. I'm always interested in new ideas on what I should do stream topics on. Also, Chase is here to visit. There we go. A random Chase appeared. You want to say hi? Look at the camera. You see? Say hi to everybody. Yeah, you go, boy. So you can influence what happens on the stream by going to stream planning and give me your ideas or whatever you want to do. So I make the streams. Remember, I make the streams for all you. You know, I don't do streams for things that. Well, I do streams for things that I like, but I'm doing them for the knowledge for you all. So I'd like for you all to drive the content that I create. You know, as you know, I don't do this to line my pockets. I've had 2 sponsored videos over the last 132 videos and 40 streams. Only 2 of them have been sponsored. I don't have a Patreon. There's really no way to donate to me other than super chat on these streams. So I'm really doing this just for everybody to get some good content. So if you have something that you want me to do, let me know. I'll check it out. And I think that's it. Have a fantastic rest of your weekend. I hope to see you on the Discord server, future streams, future videos, and all that. And until next time, I will see everybody later. Take care.